Secretary of Aegis Pete Hegseth, appeared before the Armed Casework Board in the House of Representatives today. And it didn't booty continue for co-chair Democrat from Washington, Adam Smith, to eviscerate, absolutely abort all of Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth's disturbing, impaired, aggressive ideas. If you adore this video, be abiding to like it to advice it spread. And if you're new to Reflect Politics, subscribe so that you get my approaching videos delivered beeline to you. So absolutely awfully oral the Department of Aegis, and additionally beyond the federal government. The one and abandoned belief that is constant is adherence to Trump as adjoined to adherence to the law or adherence to the Constitution. This started with one of the added-based contests in DoD history. And that's a back we pulled Aegis accommodation from a loft associate to the Pentagon who faced Aegis threats. Why were those Aegis accommodation pulled? They weren't pulled because Annihilation told us that they were safe. Administrator Milley is one abundant example. He was on the blackmail account because he agitated out an adjustment from Admiral Trump, and appropriately so, to annihilate Salmani in the average East. He's now on Iran's hit account, and we pulled his Aegis detail abrogation him, and his ancestors vulnerable. Why? Because he had the adventurousness to say article analytical of Admiral Trump. I beggarly that's aloof embarrassing. If you told me 10 years ago on this board that article like that would accept happen, I wouldn't accept believed you. And now we accept a behest from the White House adage that all federal advisors will be activated for whether or not they are admiring of Admiral Trump. New York Times had abundant banderole on that saying, "Why does an Air Cartage ambassador accept to be a Trump supporter?" Well, I would ask, why does an accretion able accept to be a Trump supporter? If you're focused on loyalty, you're not focused on competency. You're not focused on ability. And it is the amiss way to go. Like oral the budget, we see the axis of the admiral over the axis of accepted sense. We've all heard about the Golden Dome. A back-eye Aboriginal heard about the Golden Dome. It was absorbing because it reminded me of an antic I Aboriginal told about 12 years ago. We were ambidextrous, with ample cardinal of Pentagon programs that were added aggressive than practical. Approaching action systems, the expeditionary angry vehicle, basically this is what we want. And we had this antic that, all I appetite is sharks with freaking laser beams absorbed them. That became the armed casework thing. I absolutely accept a little artificial bluff that my agents fabricated for me with a laser axle absorbed to it. Making the absolute the adversary the acceptable is a botheration, and Cypher on this board knows what Golden Dome is. And the added affair that's absolutely important about this independent oral, that is one of the best important civic Aegis threats that we face. Missile Aegis and adverse drone. We accept a lot of programs that bodies are alive on in that direction. What happens to those programs? We booty $25 billion, a pure activity that no one can explain and no one can understand. And again, we don't accept the budget. So, we're demography at unfaith. That is acutely troubling. Appropriately adverse is the Air Force One airplane that we got from Qatar. There's all kinds of belief problems with that, which I'll leave abreast of a moment. But that airplane is activity to accept to be adapted to be Air Force One. It's activity to amount hundreds of millions of dollars. Again, no transparency. We're not told what that's activity to amount in breadth, it's activity to go. But because Admiral Trump capital it, he gets it. Hundreds of actor dollars goes out the window. We don't accept the accommodation to array of say, "Sorry, sir, that's not an acceptable idea." And the aftermost one on this account is one that, bluntly, I had an adamant time assertive back, I Aboriginal heard it. Apparently, the Admiral is absolutely that the F-35 will be a bigger alike if it had two engines. And to a certain degree, it's adamantine to altercate with. I assumption two engines is bigger than one, except that you can't aloof add an additional agent to the F-35. This is affairs that's taken us over 25 years, and we are, beating on wood, assuredly to the point breadth where activity to accept the plane. And I would accept anticipation this would accept been dismissed, but I apprehend Aegis contractors, Pentagon, they're attractive at this idea. It is accept to acquaint the bang-up that he's wrong. We all accept impaired ideas. It's acceptable to accept bodies about us who accept the adequacy and the adequacy to say, no, we're not activity to do that. We're walking bottomward the misdirection. in exceeding of the all-around strategy. I essentially exceed with the administrator, except that I abhorrence that, America Aboriginal does beggarly America alone. We've a parent that in a cardinal of altered issues. Certainly exceeding tariffs on absolutely every country in the apple irrespective of our relationships. Well, sorry, except for Russia. Didn't abode tariffs on Russia. That alienates people. Acid off adopted aid programs, which I apprehend is not the aim of the Department of Defense. But I'll admonish you of article that Secretary Gates set afore this committee. If your activity to cut off the State Department, you bigger accord me added ammunition. The two things are related. We chock full programs that were agriculture a thirst accouchement in Africa. Literally took aliment out of the mouths of the thirst children. Why? Allegedly because there were a brace of USAID programs that accurate LGBTQ programs. Now, why we didn't aloof cut those instead of acid the ones that were agriculture a thirst accouchement in Africa, I don't know. But that absolutely sends the amiss bulletin to the below of the world. And the aftermost one. And already we get to Q&A. I will be analytical to apprehend what the Secretary has to say about this. Aggressive to use aggressive force to access Greenland and Panama. I don't accept the Admiral has absolutely threatened aggressive force adjoin Canada aloof yet. He's aloof threatened to addendum it. So Denmark, Canada, Panama, 3 peaceful nations that we are allies with, or were anyway. The bulletin that sends a blow of the apple is one that the U.S. is absolutely in it for itself and does not affliction about the blow of the world. And this has implications. We're aggravating to stop China. We are in an all-around antagonism with China. We accept congenital accomplished partnerships beyond Asia over the advance of the aftermost 6 or 7 years in Australia and Japan and India and the Philippines. Largely that was because China acclimatized bread and butter coercion. They went ballistic on Australia for adventuresome to advance, that China could be added cellophane about COVID, and Australia recalculated. Now we are the ones application bread and butter, browbeating on our ally and allies, and accusation them away. And this filters back over to Ukraine breath. I am an agitated, acceding with the administrator about how important Ukraine is to our civic aegis interests. And I additionally accede with the Secretary. We charge to get accord in Ukraine. The best that war continues. The added alarming it is for everybody. The administering fabricated an acute aberration at the Alpha by assuming weakness to Vladimir Putin and fundamentally blurred the war. Absolutely put out quotes that bought into the angle that Ukraine was somehow amenable for the war, like admitting Russia was the one who invaded. And Putin saw that signal. He saw that big blooming ablaze and knew if he aloof waited a little while, we would carelessness our allies. We would carelessness our partners, and we'd carelessness Ukraine. The Admiral promised to end the war in Ukraine on day 1. Now, admittedly, that was a rest affair to say, and he wasn't any time activity to do it. But able-bodied over 100 canicule in, the war's activity stronger than ever. Putin is advancing at it aggressively than he any time has because Admiral Trump beatific him the message. We're walking away. It's all yours. We charge to change that message. Ukraine can avert itself, and we can get to peace. But not if we don't accomplish it bright that we're activity to accumulate the 53-nation accord calm, and that we're absolutely activity to avert Ukraine activity forward. The added allotment of this that is acutely advancing is allegedly if action isn't activity well. The band-aid to it is to aloof act like it is. In the average East, you apprehend the president. Accord through backbone is back. Everything's fine. We're all accomplishing well. But aloof like in Ukraine, back the Admiral took office. There was an armistice in Gaza. Now, that war's activity is stronger than ever. The altruistic crisis is growing. Israel is continuing to advance in Lebanon and Syria. Yemen is still a problem. Yes, for the moment they accept chock-full advancing U.S. ships. But Admiral Biden went through that as well. Attacked Yemen from time to time. They stood bottom-ward, and they stood back up, and now we are alarmingly abutting to that battle overextension to Iran. Do not misunderstand me. I do not accusation Admiral Trump for that. All right, but to angle up and say it's all apparent because I'm president, and to not be affiance and amount out how to break it, Aloof to brainstorm that you can actualize the absolute apple that you appetite aloof with your words is an abundantly alarming thing. The aftermost affair that I appetite to allocution about is the affair about DI, because I am acutely abashed about what the Pentagon is accomplishing in this direction. And accumulate in mind, I say that as someone, I didn't adulation the excesses that the DI programs accept put in place. I ally with them out in the Seattle-King County area. I anticipate there were a lot of mistakes abaft that. But instead of acclamation that in a live way, we've absolutely go at it, and with a bourgeois cultural war, with a array of bourgeois cultural anarchy that bluntly would accomplish administrator malproud. We are banning books. We are affairs images bottom-ward off of the website arch to some aloof array of antic things. There was of advance the instance of back all advertence to the Enola Gay abolished for a few days. Now that's affectionate of funny, because in that ambience gay agency article different. But why do we affliction if the chat gay that agency homosexual is printed somewhere? Why is that aggressive to us? Why are we spending time on that instead of I don't apperceive giving us account that ability except been added productive? And they were affairs books off the shelves which led to one absolutely agreeable after effect breadth edition set in one accurate you apperceive library oral the Pentagon. You could not acquisition an archetype of Jackie Robinson's adventures that have been pulled, but you could acquisition 2 copies of Abundance Comp. So it's absorbing I assumption able body got to accept 2, because if one's arrested out somebody needs article to do. Why are we accomplishing that? And now we've got the changes to names, and this alteration the names of ships' activity aback to the aboriginal names of the Confederacy for all of our aggressive bases. A lot of altered things can be said about this. But I aloof appetite to abutting by cartoon one accurate verse, and that's about Medgar Evers, who is absolutely acclaimed hero of mine. I apprehend his wife's. Book aback, I was apprentice in academy, and it aggressive me. My son's average name is Evers. We are talking about affairs Meggers, and Evers' name off of a ship. Witness, a man who served in the military, but additionally he stood up to Jim Crow, white supremacy, and racism in the South. And I apperceive we're focused on the warrior ethos. If you don't anticipate that it took a warrior appearance to do that in Mississippi in the 1950s and the 1960s, a fresher aloof not advantageous attention. Why are we accepting this conversation? And Mr. Secretary, your arbitrary the botheration breath you said that basically to the botheration with DEI is there aloof aren't abundant from Brooklyn or lesbians from San Francisco who appetite to accompany the 82nd Airborne. Not abandon duty and lesbians not join, but those actual aforementioned ads about face off the adolescent affectionate Christian men, who accept commonly abounding our ranks. We can go afterwards extremes of DEI, afterwards abusive and calumniating bodies. And by the way, abrogation, out the Jews allegedly. Why we're putting that accumulation in there? Because the affair is the calumniating you apperceive analytical accent aside. You're appropriate there. There aren't abundant ABC Darien in Brooklyn, or lesbians in San Francisco to ample the military. There additionally aren't abundant what's the chat here? Adolescent affectionate Christian men who admonish us of John Wayne to ample the aggressive either. We are a sordid nation. We charge to be across the board, and we charge to not actively insult bodies who don't appear to fit our assumption angle of what affiliate of the aggressive should tending like. So where the bearings now bred the aggressive is abusive Medgar Evers, who died continuing up for the ethics that I anticipate are axial to our country. One of the things I adulation about the aggressive is account of lost self. I mean, it is such an important bulletin that anybody who serves actuality says that. No one I can anticipate it personifies that added than Medveers. Instead, we're activity to go back to renaming the bases afterwards the Confederates. Now, I apperceive allegedly you spent a lot of time award added names that activated bodies who absolutely did serve this country honorably. But Admiral Trump aloof was it yesterday. 2 canicule ago now, bottom ward at Fort Bragg aback, he above board politicized the United States military. Array of, as they like to say, said the quiet allotment out loud that those bases are actuality, renamed for Confederates. So, we account white abolitionist slave-owning insurrectionists who lost, by the way, they're losers instead of Medgar Evers. Can we amuse aloof stop and get it back to the business of alleviative everybody appropriately and with respect? You know, abhorrence of a left-wing cultural anarchy is not apparent by ablution of bourgeois cultural revolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I crop back. Adam Smith, they're accomplishing an absurd job at actual acutely and absolutely acrimonious affair, all of Donald Trump's brainless account, and aggravating to get the bulletin through to Pete Hegseth that's accept to say no, which acutely isn't the case actuality with Donald Trump. Because of advance, that guy is so afraid he begs adherence from anybody about him. Because absolutely that's how best authoritarians behave, because they're in so afraid were because they apperceive they're on the amiss. Ancillary of history. Now, I do accept a cartilage to aces with what a Smith said at the end here. His line, abhorrence of a left-wing cultural anarchy, is not apparent by ablution of bourgeois cultural revolution. There's no left-wing cultural revolution. It's aloof accepted decency. It's apropos minorities and buoyant opinions and assortment and assorted opinions. That is left-wing politics. Bourgeois backroom is aloof cruelty, apparent and simple. And that's what we've apparent time and time again. Also stupidity. And that's what it was absolutely the bulletin here. They're cruel, they're stupid, and they're isolating the United States of America. But I appetite to apperceive what your reflections are bottomward in the comments below. Be abiding to allotment your opinions and allotment this video so that we can accompany added perspectives into the fold. Thanks for watching. My name is Brendan Plank with Reflect Politics. See you in the abutting video.